Testing. Secure your Elixir apps with Paraxial.io. From code analysis and bot defense to dependency checks, they've got you covered. Elixir first design with GitHub integration. Elevate your security at Paraxial.io. What's up, guys? I'm Jacob Blitzo, your Elixir Mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor Podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. I'm excited to welcome Zach Daniel back. A lot of people know him for the Ash framework. And today we're going to talk, we kind of touched on Igniter last time you were on, but I feel like it was like just about to be released, or it was just released. But welcome back, man.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I suspect it would have been still in the formative phases. I forget exactly what stage it was in, but I think it would have been pretty early days, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's not 1.0 yet, but it's out there. Where like it's pretty stable and people are using it. It's got a lot of traction, surprisingly. I mean, I guess not that surprisingly, but
no, like it's awesome. I feel like all my latest guests that have been on, if they're writing a library or some sort of tooling, have all mentioned Igniter. So they're all using it or implementing it in some fashion, which is awesome. I love to hear that. Do you want to we'll dive into the weeds as we go on, but you want to give the macro overhead of what Igniter is?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a couple different things. And I found usually the best way to explain it is to sort of talk about it, from different users' perspective, right? So as an Elixir developer, right? Not you're working at, on your day job, working on applications or, et cetera. But what Igniter is for you is a toolkit to install new packages and to upgrade packages. So without Igniter, the workflow is pretty straightforward, which is you go and you maybe check hex, or you run mixhex.info and you see if you want a new package, right? You want to install Oben or something like that. You go to their docs, you read their getting started guide, you copy in the dependency into your dependencies, and you follow some steps, etc. With Igniter, the first step of that, copying the dependency into your application, that's automated for all hex packages, or even just GitHub repos and anything. You just say mix-igniter.install Oben, for example, and it puts it into your dependencies, the latest version for the package in your dependencies. The other thing though is packages can define installers that will do modify your code base for you automatically to patch whatever is required to install that package. And speaking of Oben, theirs was actually just merged. Oben has an Igniter installer now.
That's awesome.
Right. I don't know if it's released, but I know that it's merged. And so now when you say if you start a new Phoenix project and you say mix-igniter.install Oben, it's going to modify it's going to set up all the config. It's going to update. It's going to pick an adapter based on what kind of ecto repo you have. It's going to it's all basically automatic installation. So for developer, adding Oben to a project is a one-liner now, which is a huge quality of life difference.
That's awesome.
And we also have tools. This is less leveraged this is new. People aren't really using this yet. I think this is going to get in use much more later as we have more adoption, but we have tools for writing upgrade scripts. So let's say Oben goes from a major version to another major version. You can say mix-igniter, or even just a minor version, there's a deprecation or something like that. You can say mix-igniter.upgrade instead of mix-deps.update. So it's just a stand-in. They do the same things, except mix-igniter.update allows those packages to define automatic upgrade scripts that will modify your project to handle some new change in the way that the library ought to be used.
That's so cool. That's nice.
It's really awesome. And it's not always worth it. Sometimes it's you do an upgrade and it's it would be way too complicated for us to script this in your code base. It's you have to go read a README, right? Mm-hmm. But for when it does make sense, super great developer experience. And the other big factor for new projects or for developers, right, is new project generation. So there's a stand-in replacement for mix new called mixigniter.new that allows you to, in one command, install any number of packages and get your app set up from scratch with. You get for Phoenix, it's a little bit special because they don't have an Igniter installer, they have their own generator. So you say like -- with Phoenix.new. But you can install like 50 packages right out the gate. And so that's actually how we recommend new people getting started with Ash. We say mixigniter.new -- with Phoenix new, because they probably want Phoenix, and then -- install Ash, Ash Postgres, Ash GraphQL. And that all three of those have their full installers that set everything up. So you literally are
nice.
0 to hero in one line of code. It's
you just skipped like 4 readmes.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the gist of Igniter for developers. And for package authors, Igniter is how you make all of that work well for your users, right? Igniter is a framework internally for patching code. So we have all these tools like set this config, update this mix alias, add this thing to the application tree. So we have all of these like really nice APIs to say how to modify a project, and low-level APIs to say, go find this file that looks like this and go to this part of this code and make this change and all that sort of stuff. So it's the toolkit that makes you actually able to write those installers that give that DX to end users. So that's Igniter in a nutshell, or I guess kind of a coconut shell, because that was a long explanation.
No, I think that's good. I feel like it sounds really cool. I have used projects with Igniter, but I haven't like dug into using Igniter like for any of my own projects. Do you basically install it like the dependency the same way, and you're just using different features of it if you're writing like install scripts and things for something, or how does that work?
Well, so the way that you set it up, there's 2 ways that Igniter gets on your computer, right? There's the hex archive for igniter.new to work. And then there is, it just in a regular Elixir app, it gets added as a dependency like anything else.
Okay.
But we do have a cool feature of the way that the archive works, is that both the archive and the dependency define mixigniter.install, like that mix task. So if you are, let's say you're in a project that doesn't have Igniter, if you say mixigniter.install some package, it will add Igniter to your project and install that package. So you can actually just sort of like whatever Elixir project you happen to be in, you can just mixigniter.install as long as you have that archive.
Okay. Nice.
So that's like the pattern of like using it and actually setting it up. Is just a mixed dependency like anything else, but we have that archive that gives you some convenience and Igniter new.
That's cool. I was browsing the README a little bit and some other things. You're also able to use it for like for refactoring. Like if I want to rename a function or something, it'll like crawl my code base and find it everywhere.
Yeah. So that was we have a couple refactors that are in place. There's actually only one that I would call like a general purpose refactor, which is that rename function. But it's a really smart refactor. The way that it works, like it will rename a function across your entire code base. And it will also, let's say you have a function in like module foo and you want to like move it to module bar. You just say rename my function and it renames all calls and moves the function to the other module.
Oh, that's nice.
Right. Yeah. So it's that kind of like really smart project-wide refactors that we actually don't have any tools for right now. There was a recent package, refactorx, that was like a language server type tool that was released recently. And it's a really cool project and has like 20 different refactors. Like we only have the one project-wide refactor that I did as sort of like a proof of concept. But it's all file local. It makes changes within a single file, not your whole project. So my goal, or I'm hoping eventually that Igniter can actually be like the repository for these refactors, and that we can potentially, I'm going to try to maybe see about getting it into the language server as the language servers, the new language servers mechanism for rewriting your project, because that's what it's for. It has like a virtualized version of your project that you can stage all these changes to and then write them. So I want to collaborate with all of those people, the language server folks, the author of Refactor X and everything, to get something that can work in a language server or not. That's really important, right?
That would be awesome.
Like,
yeah.
you want to be able to say, like, run a mix task to do a refactor and to automate these things and to script refactors even, right? That's what the really super powerful.
How about can you rename a project with Igniter?
Oh, that's a good idea. Almost certainly we could write a project renamer. There isn't one right now, but there's the problem. Like, it would never be perfect. And this is one of those things, like these patchers and installers and stuff, like, you never really know what somebody did with their code base.
Right.
Like, you can, there's no real guarantees, which is why Igniter always just presents you with a diff. And it's like, hey, do you like these changes that we made? Right. It even warns if you have like unstaged Git changes. It's like, hey, or, if you have uncommitted Git changes, it's like, hey, you should probably commit everything and make sure everything's clean before you do this. That way you don't end up like in a world of hurt of like which changes were mine and which, but you can get really far enough that it doesn't matter that it's not perfect. Right.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Well, like when I was doing more consultancy work, I would have like very generic, like I had a very generic like REST API project, and I had that templated in GitHub, and all I would do is like create a new project. And then I actually wrote a script that would rename it for me to whatever I wanted to name that project. And yeah, Igniter would be an awesome Igniter feature for sure.
For sure. Yeah. So I think it was Owen Bickford actually wrote a post that was talking about using Igniter for like a similar thing where they have to start a lot of new projects and they need to give their teams like they're an agency, right? So they need to give their teams a quick start and an idiomatic application that looks like the rest of their tooling. And Igniter is a big part of that because it can be composed. Like you can stack like 20 Igniter tasks that are project modifiers all on top of each other, and they'll all run sequentially and write one final change at the end. Like no changes on the way there have to be written to the file system. So if you're writing a thing like a modular project generator, Igniter is perfect for that. It's perfect for like for breaking that stuff up into here's the 12 things we need to change about a project and making some of them optional. Like if the project needs, Kafka, then compose this little generator in as well that will modify the project in some way. So great for agencies, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. Like right now too, like I have the web hosting platform that I've built, and I'm generating physical directories for every website that I build. Like ideally that'll eventually be in like a Postgres table, right? And I'll just pull the code and render it. But right now everything is routed and found through directories, but I feel like I could use Igniter for generating all that stuff too.
For sure. Yeah, there's Beacon has a cool long-term use case for Igniter as well.
Yeah, Beacon is a really cool project, and that's like they inspired me to like rethink a lot of the stuff that I was doing in my project. Just like they store, static Heeks files and live views and everything in tables.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really cool stuff. I think like one of the things that Leandra had talked to me about was using Igniter to like write back changes. So like, let's say you like go onto your live app and you like drag your template files, you make some changes and all this sort of stuff. Right. But let's say you want to like sync like your local app with what you've changed in their like GUI on your deployed app. So they could use Igniter to like apply the changes from the server to your local application. So you could have this like process of both local development and server development using Igniter to modify the projects.
That's awesome. That's very cool.
Yeah. It doesn't sound super easy to build, but like, we do have, we have the low level tools that they need or medium level tools that they need.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think Beacon CMS is one of the coolest projects out there too right now. Yeah. They're doing a lot of cool stuff. And I love the way that they're using like the ETS tables for storing routes and everything. So all the heavy lifting doesn't have to keep happening when, you know, you have defined routes to live views. I don't know. It's just a cool project. If you guys are listening and haven't looked, definitely check it out and look at the source code.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we're in a bit of a Cambrian explosion in terms of like cool and interesting projects. You know, like Beacon is a great one, and I think the thing is that yeah, I mean, so you look at stuff like Beacon, which is really cool. I think, you know, Oben probably started it, was one of the OG let's build these things in a way that really it's like Elixir centric, right? It's Elixir focused tooling. It's really tightly cohesive to the ecosystem that we have. And then you have things like Error Tracker, and I think Beacon is a great example, like really tightly integrated with LiveView. This one isn't super integrated, but I mean, I guess it kind of is. It sits inside of LiveView, but they launched it like yesterday, the hologram framework, which seems really interesting. It's like a isomorphic web framework built on top of Phoenix that you write just pure Elixir, and the hologram generates JavaScript from it and it generates the server code. Like it's super interesting. It's very young, right? So I'm not here saying go use hologram
wild.
necessarily.
Yeah.
But it's an exciting project, right? And I love that people are working on these things.
Oh, that's really cool. Huh. Hologram. Cool. Yeah, it's seeing all the projects pop up is exciting though. Like, and then like you were saying, Oben, or like Paraxial, like security just for like Elixir. I think Michael just released a Ruby version 2, but all these tools just for, you know, our ecosystem. It's cool to see.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it's a weird word for me to use because I try not to be very like dogmatic about things in general, but I'm starting to think of myself as an Elixir maximalist. Like I think that even if I was going to write code that had like a service or any other thing that needed to run Rust for whatever reason, which is something that happens, you know, regularly, right? It's like Elixir's not great for systems, like low level systems programming, certain kinds of things. Actually, we have nerves, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's say I needed Rust. I would still wrap it in an Elixir shell. Like Elixir would still be running my Rust code. I wouldn't write a web server in Rust. I would write so for me, I'm like, I love it when I see these stuff that lets me just do it in Elixir, because I feel like it's the best platform and virtual machine that we could possibly have. And it's anything I need slots right in somewhere. Even if I need Rust, if I need Python, if I need JavaScript, or whatever, right? Like I can plug it in and play it to my like core Elixir tool.
I'm on the same. I'm on your same page. I agree completely. Like let's just keep it Elixir, and you know, we'll write code where we need to for other things if we have performance issues or just other needs, right? Yeah,
for sure.
Like, yeah. When I started writing Elixir, like now it's 2025. So like 5 years ago, I haven't wanted to write JavaScript ever again. At least not a full project in JavaScript.
Yeah. It's really funny. Like everybody in the Elixir ecosystem is super friendly about it, but it's a lot of like folks allergic to JavaScript. And
yeah, I get a rash actually.
Right. Oh man. I think a lot of it too is like, I don't think it's really, for me, it's not about the language itself. And truthfully, TypeScript, I think, is a wonderful language, right? From a language perspective, right? What it's like to write the code. You can dig yourself in a couple of holes with like types and certain things. I mean, you can do that with any. It's like people are like, look at this mess I made. That means that this whole programming language sucks. And I'm like, well, maybe you're just
you just do type any and you're good. Just
yeah, exactly. Yeah. As any, as unknown. Yeah, I mean, but I think the real thing that people are tired of doing is like this orchestration between, they're tired of this like manual orchestration between server and client of like, look, I'm going to do this. I'm going to set up massive amounts of structure in my application. I'm going to write APIs, and I'm going to validate the inputs and outputs to those APIs. And I'm going to write a mapping layer from my APIs to my databases so that I can call all this crap. And then on my client, I'm going to write things that call my APIs and that validate the things that they call the APIs, and that serve, and they're all going to communicate in this whole new structure that I had to build, and all these bugs that come from that process, just so that I can like show a couple of forms to a user, and when they click a button, it like does something special in the backend. And I set up how many thousands and thousands of lines of code to make that happen. I think that's what most people, when they think about JavaScript and writing JavaScript, that's what they're really like. They're like, no, I don't want to do that again. Like I would like to keep things simple. And you know, I get that. That's why that's where live view wins, right?
Well, and the pace at which frameworks get released and updated too in the JavaScript world is kind of insane. True. It's hard to keep up. And I mean, I guess like anything, like if you make it the most popular thing, of course, changes are going to be rapid. Like you really can't avoid it.
Right. I mean, I've always been somebody pushing for Elixir adoption in general. And look, the truth is, folks, that's practical. Like I make my money with Elixir. So like the more companies that use Elixir, the better my personal prospects are going to be, and the better all of our prospects are going to be, better job security, right? So there's a pragmatic aspect to that. But there are people who are like, do we really want Elixir to be as popular as JavaScript? Is that like the actual end goal, that everybody in the world writes Elixir? Or is there maybe, you know, a happier place somewhere in the middle?
I think there's probably a happy median, right?
Right. I tend to agree. But we got to eat, right? And we got to like make sure that we got to take care of our community, because there are people who want to write Elixir who can't right now.
Well, it's hard. Like I basically started my own company to write Elixir code, and then that was hard. And like I like just officially became a senior engineer on a team, and I get to write Elixir now and get paid. Right. But yeah, it's hard because I would like most of the job market's senior engineers, so it's very hard for junior and newer engineers to find jobs. And so you're kind of forced to go the JavaScript route, or like maybe iOS development or some sort of mobile dev, and you just got to be patient.
Yeah. I mean, this is a conversation that gets had at pretty much every room where Elixir is the main topic, right? Which is that the seniority of the ecosystem, or like the seniority of like, you know, most Elixir engineers, it's like way top heavy in that regard. There's so much theory crafting and like the reason that is. And I have my opinions. Like I think that Elixir it allows you to do a lot more with less people. And so you just don't need the same amount of, you just don't need a bunch of people at the keyboard to like,
you need a lot less resources. Well, and I feel like I've like heard the conversation, like there's a lot more like senior devs that are in Elixir, not enough new people. But I also think that might be because we've experienced a lot of like hardships on other stacks. And then like you kind of get fed up, and then you find Elixir or Erlang and you're like, okay, this is pretty awesome. This works.
Right. And, you know, as somebody who loves all of our Elixir tooling, I think it's one of those things of like, we got to have our eyes open on the situation here, which is that despite how easy it is for all of us to do our jobs, because we know how these things work, it cannot be argued that things like getting started with like a JavaScript using like create next app and Vercel, right? That for somebody who has no idea what they're doing, look, we know what they don't know, which is like, sure, you had a great time getting started, but that's not the long-term way that you want to build your applications, right? But you cannot argue with the idea that those people can deploy these applications. Like they had no idea what they're doing, and they're using AI now, and AI knows React like so well. And you put all this together, and it's like the getting started story for junior developers is just not even close to what it is for some other ecosystems.
Well, and it also can be argued that it's a problem to worry about later.
Right.
Like you don't have to think about scaling when you're building your product. Like you need proof of concept and an MVP.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I get it. Like a little bit you have to think about scaling, but like if you're not sure where it's going, or if your goal is just to raise some funding to take it to the next step, there's like a balancing act you have to do.
There is. It's true. There is. I think it's interesting though, because like, what's the right way to phrase it? It's almost like a non-survivorship bias to how we ought to build things. Like you have all these people who try to start a business and they can't get their first thing going, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they can't get funding and whatever. And so they think that that's the big challenge. But like, there's like second doors, third doors, fourth doors where like you have to break through those things too.
Mm-hmm.
And if what you built was a mess, like, congratulations, you got in the door, but like lots of founders make significant VC rounds and end up making no significant amount of money at the end of the whole situation. Just because somebody gave your company $2 million doesn't mean that you personally got rich.
Right.
So like,
No, of course not. That's
right.
staying in the or in the business, right? That might allow you to hire some expertise, right?
Exactly. So there's a lot of people out there who like they make it through that first door, but they didn't build something sustainable and real and something that they could actually scale. And what ultimately happens is they are struggle busing for 5 or 6 years, and then they shut down. Or so to me, the way I see it, I don't know. I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of like, oh, just do whatever you have to do to get to that, to the starting point. Personally,
I am like in between, like kind of think about it, but don't stress about it. And I don't know, because you're going to make a ton of mistakes, especially if you're new to picking your tech stack or whatever. Like a lot of people just go with the popular choice, right? And that we have Owen Bickford joining us, and he goes, MVPs often become legacy, and that's not fun.
right.
which is true. Like everyone knows touching that legacy code that just like is spaghetti code, but magically works. And one little change breaks everything.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, I think that people, we emphasize that phase of things too much, because that's a place where like everybody fails. And I get it. It's like, if that's true, then you should focus on that. That should be what you're optimizing for. I guess the thing is, for me, I think it's a false dichotomy. That's the real truth. I think
Fair
that
enough.
it's that people are like, I don't, do things that don't scale, because, and that's like the catchphrase, right, of the modern startup
Just
person.
build,
Like, do
build
things that
fast, right?
Right. And to some degree, I get it. That is true. Like you can over focus on the things that scale, right? But I think that it's people like myself and people who are trying to build new tooling, etc. It's our job to like solve that false dichotomy, because it's not a real one. You can build, like, Phoenix is a pretty good getting started experience.
I agree.
And
you can move fast and build well.
Right. Exactly. And so it's like, it's on us to make it so people don't have to keep making that choice. It's like, okay, well, do I want to build for scalability, or do I want to build fast? It's like, well, hold up, let's solve the root thing so that we can do both. And I think that's what is amazing about Elixir, is that we like it because it cuts this healthy medium, right? It's not the easiest thing to write. Like when you're starting as a beginner, it is not simpler to wrap your head around the concepts in Elixir, from what I've heard.
I agree. Like I struggle bust for like a year, like where I was just building a simple REST API as well. Like I wasn't even touching OTP stuff, but just the functional and immutability paradigm was hard coming from object-oriented land.
Right. But what we like about it is as once you understand it, then it is easier, like I now like mutable programming, like I was writing some like vanilla JavaScript the other day, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can just say like this dot whatever equal. I'm like, oh my God, I can do that, but I think like it's a happy medium. Elixir in general is like this nice fine line between we know that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of scalability, and we know that we can move quickly, and we have the tools for that.
Yeah, Brian Cardarella just said Elixir lets you have your cake and eat it too.
Amen. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't talked much about Igniter, but we kind of got it all out.
Let's circle back. I'm curious. Let's see. So it's kind of a code generator.
Right. Yeah.
And it makes your life easier for difficult installations. Now, like if I was like a package creator, could I have different versions, different scripts to run for like different ways to use my library or framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So for Ash authentication, for example, I'm not pitching Ash here, but all of the Ash packages have installers. So if I
mean, you
installers.
are the Ash guy, so you
I
kind of have to.
But yeah, there's mixed Phoenix Gen auth, for example, and that gets you like username and password authentication. As far as I know, I think it's just username and password authentication. But
yeah, it's just like basic username, password, and they set you up like, I think they set you up decent for a place to start at least.
So I won't get into it here but I don't agree with the general idea that like of using like generated code for your auth. Personally, I think it's not the right general path, but we have installers that allow, so you can say mix ash authentication.install, and all that does is sets up like the base layer. It creates users for you. It creates a token table. It sets some like basic stuff up. But then you can say mix ash authentication.add strategy and say like, I want users to be able to sign in with passwords. And you can say .add strategy magic link, and it'll like set up all the actions and the structure and everything for magic link.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really nice. And you can technically do it in one command. If you say install Ash authentication and then you say -- auth strategies password magic link, you can do it in one command and have that full auth set up.
We can talk to Owen about how much he hates password authentication.
Right. I want to talk to Owen about getting something going with like web auth and components or something in Ash authentication.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, so you can do that. And we also use in just regular Ash, mix ash.gen.resource, like mix ecto or mix Phoenix Gen, whatever resource. What do you say? Mix Phoenix Gen context or something like that?
Yeah, well, context, yeah, depending on what you want to generate, right? I can look up the list. I always forget and have to look it up anyways.
Right. So we use Igniter for that as well, which is pretty cool because you can like compose. So let's say you had a task, like you had a thing in your app, there's a set of like 5 or 6 different resources that you want to exist in like all of your new applications. You can write an Igniter task that calls igniter.compose task. And because all of our tasks are mixed tasks and Igniter code generators. They're the same thing for us. Okay. So you just say igniter.compose task and you pass in a bunch of command line arguments. And so you could generate one command that would make 5 resources that look like this, right? And use the options from the generator, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you can build all of these different tasks. It's not just installers.
Yeah, that's nice. So you're just calling Elixir scripts essentially, like.
Yeah, they're basically an Igniter task it lives inside of a mixed task, and if you call it as a mixed task, then it just creates like a new Igniter for your project and then it passes it to a run function that's defined inside of that Igniter task. So it's like you can call it as a mixed task and it just does that one thing.
Okay.
But you can, when you chain them, it's like it figures out what the task is by the task name, like the mixed task name, and it goes and finds the module. But instead of calling mixed task run, it calls igniter or run. I actually forget whatever. It calls that function with an igniter that already has all the other changes that have happened prior to your change already set up. So it's just like you can chain them,
Nice. That's cool. Owen just said he has issue number 84 for rewriting his web auth components tasks with Igniter.
Oh yeah. That'll be cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. I think that's the thing. So when you do that, you open yourself up to a whole new way of like a whole new level of like tooling composition. So like, for example, Oben has their Igniter installer. And now we have a package called Ash Oben, right? And Ash Oben doesn't work without Oben, obviously, right? So, but when somebody installs Ash Oben, I can say there's a function in Igniter to run to say make sure that like install this other thing, right? And so I'm going to say install Oben and go make these a couple other additional changes to what Oben sets up for you. So now you just say mix igniter.install ash Oben, and because Oben defined their, in this idiomatic Igniter centric way, I can just make sure Oben's installed for any project that depends on Oben. So like that is the same thing for WebAuthn components. If somebody like needs to build their own generators, that definitely requires that. They just say make sure that's installed, and it'll run the latest version of your package's installers. So it's all very maintainable in that way too. Like when new updates happen or bug fixes to these generators happen, it's like they all compose nicely.
Yeah, that's very cool. I like that. I have a lot to learn. I feel like I have to just make a project just to play with Igniter now, because it sounds like it's quite fun.
I do actually enjoy the programming model, and there's some like it's kind of, what's like a good example of it? It's almost like when you're working with like a plug.con, right? Like it's a very nice pattern because you just build up this data structure, and then and you can easily just slot in these little modifications. It's the same exact pattern, but instead of a con, you're working with an Igniter that has a bunch of staged file changes that you can make changes to. But some of the cool, like, it's really nice to test. I didn't expect this, but when you put it in test mode, and it never actually writes to the file system. And you can use tools like assert has patch that says like assert that, starting from these files, I run this command and that it has these changes to this file. Or you can say like assert creates and all this stuff. And so you actually get like in-memory testing, parallelizable testing, even though what you're testing is changes to a multi-file project. But you don't have to like create temporary directories and run your generators and then do like file.read and say like, does it look the way I want it to look or anything like that.
Nice. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's really pleasant.
Yeah, that's awesome. Felix is asking if there's an ETA on the Ash book coming out.
Oh my gosh. Everybody. Listen, last time all I'm going to say is very soon. And every time you ask, it gets even very sooner. Like you can practically hold your breath is all I'm trying to say. Like just
I feel like the last 1% is always tough, especially with like technical books, I'm sure.
Yeah. Look, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a little lead in here. The beta's ready. It's just the publishing industry does not work like the day that everything's ready to go. Like you set dates and you get certain things like registered and all this sort of stuff. I don't know anything about how the publishing industry works. This is new for me. My co-author, Rebecca, who by the way has done most of the work, is a much better writer than I am. She knows a lot more about this process than I do. But yeah, it's not like we finish a chapter and then we like send it off and then they just publish it. You know what I mean? So there are steps and we are going through those steps, but like really soon, I promise.
I don't know. I don't want to say never, but I don't think I want to experience book publishing.
Yeah. The truth is, for me, what's harder about it is, we're working with Prog. They're really great. What's harder about it for me is how much work you have to put into something before you get feedback. That before you get real feedback from the people that you're writing for. And that's never the way that I work, right? I'm always like, I commit everything quickly. I'm out there in public asking questions. Hey, try this. I made this new thing. Try this. I write small articles if I write articles, and I say like, what do you think? Like, and so for me, spending like weeks on 25 pages of like well thought out material, thinking like the only people who have looked at this are Rebecca, myself, and our publisher, and like maybe certain people that we have brought on to advise on the book. And that is a really difficult place for me. Like, that's not my emotional happy place, is like, okay, we're about to drop how many chapters to the world that very few people, relatively speaking, have actually reviewed.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
That's kind of scary. Do you know roughly like how many pages is the book?
I don't know how many pages. It's going to be 9 or 10 chapters.
Okay.
When it's all said and done. But
That'll be good. I need an Ash book. I'll be
yeah,
first on the list.
I really like it, and I think Rebecca has a talent for what we're doing. It's not. There are some people who I think have been using Ash for like many years who are hoping for like all this crazy like advanced context and like really like deep stuff, and we do I think have like a decent amount of that, right? But like it doesn't make sense for that. Like the world doesn't need the like hey, you've been using Ash for 3 years now, here's all the power user stuff you never
Yeah.
knew. That's just not really like
We
what.
need to just know how to get our toes wet and get started and start to
Right,
understand your DSLs and like how they're written, right? That's the
right.
yeah.
But and this I think arms people so well, and it covers like real ways to do real things with like really in-depth examples. Like you go from basically nothing to full application. Um and I think that's the thing, is it empowers you then to
Hmm.
know what kind of questions to ask, what kind of things to look for. And uh it's just, I'm really excited. I'm
Yeah,
so
that's
excited
awesome.
because I just want to point people to the book. Like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah,
I
yeah.
know, you just go read the book. Like
Well,
it
like
all makes sense.
when I was using Ash, I was just digging through like your demo code projects and like I would find little snippets. Like I would like go through your past live streams just to find like the one thing I wanted to do.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, and then once I learned it, I was like, oh, duh, that's so easy. It makes sense. But yeah, it'll
Yeah.
be good.
We need a lot more examples in the regular documentation too, right? Like, so it's not like the goal here isn't to say like, oh, if you want to learn how to use Ash, you have to buy a book.
Hmm.
Um, but the main thing is like the book can assume a lot of knowledge about where you are in your learning trajectory, right? Like you it builds up all of this stuff, right? That would just
Hmm.
not be reasonable to write into like a series or a set of guides um, on the uh, like documentation, right? We have to split it up in reasonable ways, but and I'm working on it like all the time, but we need a lot better examples and a lot better reference documentation for the various functions that you can, like all this different stuff. So,
Yeah, it's hard.
um,
Documentation is probably the hardest part of a project.
yeah, I had this little fantasy in my head that like people would help. Like I was
That's
like, oh,
cute.
look, I
That's a
made this.
good
Yeah, I made this.
fantasy.
Exactly. I made this really cool thing. And I know I'm actually insulting a couple people right now. And I want to make it clear, the people who are helping
Are amazing.
yeah, they're amazing. They're lifesavers. And I'm not talking about you. But I remember thinking like, oh, whenever somebody doesn't understand something, they're just going to, I'll just let them know like, hey, make a PR to the doc. So, and that's 1% of people, less than
Hmm.
1% of people that actually do that sort of thing. So like a lot of things, it ultimately falls to me or other
Yeah.
people on
I mean,
the
it's hard. We're
team.
all doing our own things that keep us busy, right?
Right. Well, and you don't necessarily, like, I get it. It's like when you're learning something and you come to understand it, you don't necessarily, that doesn't mean that you've come to understand the way that it should have been explained to other people. Right.
Right.
And so it doesn't, just because you learn something doesn't mean you know exactly how to change the docs to help other people. So I'm not blaming anybody, but it was a learning experience for me that like, okay, that's something that I need to take on as well.
Yeah, I've always had people, they want me to do like full tutorials, like how to take, Phoenix projects up on like a Docker image and like launch it through DigitalOcean Droplet or something like that. And I was like, guys, to be honest though, my dev work is very hacked together and I'd be horrible at explaining why it works.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because, okay, I'm going to say something. It's really, this is bad. Right. But, okay. We are wrapping up the testing chapter. And there's a lot of really good stuff in there, but it's a little bit of do as I say, not as I do, because for me personally, I know most of this stuff like the absolute back of my hand. And there's a lot of times where I don't write the level of testing that I should personally write. And here's the thing, it comes back to bite me like
Hmm.
on my application, right? So I'm not saying like, oh, you don't need testing. I'm saying you do need testing. You need it a lot. And I regularly pay the piper for the times that I decide, oh, well, I know how that works really well, so it's okay. I don't need to write it.
And then those regression bugs get you.
Yeah, exactly. Every time. And so that was also an interesting thing about, testing before working on this chapter. I'd always been very hands off. I told people, look, use XUnit, test whatever you want. Right.
Hmm.
And I realized that was not useful advice for people. So that we had to do better, and I had to come up with, I had to take things that I knew in the back of my head, right, and formalize them and make them actionable for people who it's like, okay, what are the tools that you should use, and what is the way that you should think about testing your application? That stuff's really hard. So it's kind of the same thing. It's like you can do it. You could deploy an app to DigitalOcean, but can you write a well thought out guide that covers everything that people care about? Right? It's like
it's hard. Well, like one thing that I do, I don't know if I should like share this honestly, but I'm not a huge fan with like using AI for writing code. Sometimes I'll use it to like get a general gist of how I should write something, but I'm not a big fan. But one thing I do like is when I have a completed function, you like asking AI like all the use cases you should test for is the most amazing thing in the world, and it has helped me like increase my test coverage like tenfold.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I actually hadn't considered using it that way. One thing we will do at some point is write like a test generator for Ash resources that like looks at all of the actions on the resource. This will use Igniter. It like looks at all of the actions and all of the various things that you have, and will just like spit out a shell of a test for you that is like ready for you to run actions and make assertions and stuff. But it's an interesting idea to have AI look at the action and say like, help me, because if the test passes, it kind of doesn't matter, right? Like it doesn't matter how useful the actual test is, right? It's like if you make a change and a test fails, either you broke something or the test can be deleted. So it kind of doesn't matter if you have a bunch of extra tests that pass. Like it's inconvenient, I guess.
Well, it's better to actually have useful tests, right? Like it's easy to write a bunch of asserts that don't really matter. But
it's better, but like, is it better than the alternative having no tests, right? Like, would I rather have like 5 tests where I don't really need 3 of them, or 0 tests? Like, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting. I feel like
I don't know.
5 tests, like.
I mean, at least your test coverage looks better.
Right? Yeah. Show that to your boss, right?
Like,
look, test coverage went up to 99%.
Yeah.
There's an interesting pattern. I haven't used it yet, but I know that there's a framework or tool or something for it in Elixir called fuzz testing. Where that I think is actually super interesting, where what you do is it goes through your code base making like random changes, and then if no tests fail, then like there's something wrong. So let's say you have like a function called def add, right? That takes A and B and adds A plus B. It'll just like change plus to minus, and then it'll run your tests. And it's like, did any test fail? And it's like, well, if no test failed, then even if you're technically running this code, none of your assertions actually depend on that code looking the way that it is. So that could mean you're not properly, maybe that's like a tax calculation in reality, and you aren't actually testing the output of your, the result of your tax calculation, even though it's covered, even though it's technically run in your code base. And I think that's pretty exciting. It's a pretty exciting idea for finding ways to improve your test coverage and like the important things that aren't covered.
Yeah, that's interesting. That reminds me, like I was reading an article about like Netflix once, and I'm Googling it. I don't know if it's called this, but I feel like it's like chaos monkey testing.
Yeah, that's the
one.
Well,
they'll randomly fail their systems during like running tests, and like they have to recover smoothly from them all. But that's cool. That's a cool concept to randomly. So if your tests don't fail, your tests aren't good, because it actually changes how your test is written.
Yeah, it changes your actual code base. Like it'll go into your functions and like flip the order of operation, the order of arguments, or that sort of stuff. I may have been like hallucinating that there's an Elixir framework for this. I thought there was a set of tools in Elixir for doing this.
I don't. If anyone listening knows the name, I couldn't find it. I saw it, like someone asked a question in the Elixir forum, but that was all I could pull up for Elixir.
Well, okay. I did not. Yeah, this is fuzz testing is a method that uses random or invalid inputs to find security vulnerabilities. This isn't what I was thinking. That's maybe I didn't use the right term, fuzz testing. there's a version of testing that changes your code and says you should get a test. Maybe it's not called fuzz testing. I'm not sure.
All right, anyone listening, save the day. Let us know.
This is what viewers are for, right?
Exactly. Well, that's that's why I love doing these things live, because then you get to chat with people instead of just reading comments later. Like, it's way more fun to catch people live.
Right. Yeah. I've enjoyed it actually. Like, even though when I'm streaming, I'll do like, I'll be working on something that I have to finish. Every once in a while, somebody will chime in with something. I mean, sometimes they'll save me time. Like they'll, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? And I'm like, oh my God, no, I didn't think about doing it that way. But even still, a lot of times it's just an interesting conversation. Like that's kind of the thing I enjoy about streaming more than anything is like, just.
I think Owen tried to share a link, but it doesn't let us get links. So Owen, if you see this, you should DM me on Twitter or something, and then I can pull up the link. Because, yeah, he shared something, but I think YouTube stops people from sending links. Unless it's me. I think I can send links, but I don't think anyone else can. But
there's another testing thing that's worth talking about that's kind of interesting in Elixir. It's actually by the other core team member for Igniter called Nimi, I think. Yeah, that has a thing called auto assert, where
type module. What?
No, it's snapshot testing is what it's called. So what you do is you write auto assert, and then you just put in like the thing you want to assert on, and you run the test, and you don't have to say like, let's say you say like auto assert 2 + 2. You just say that 2 + 2, and then you run it, and it changes the code to say 2 + 2 = 4.
Is it snapshot?
So like, no, that's something else. Here, I guess I don't know. Maybe I can send you this link in. It's called Nini. I think our chat that we have will let me send you links.
Oh yeah, that'll work. I just have to know.
I don't know how to pronounce. So it's another Zach, also fun fact, that works on Igniter with me. I don't know how to pronounce his last name because we haven't met in person. I think it's like Alan or
cool.
Alon. But all you do is basically say auto assert something, and then it figures out what the output is and puts in the output for you. So it's really nice, like when you're doing when you're writing something and you're like, I know it's right now. I just want to write a regression test for later. Like, so you just say auto assert and it'll like.
Okay. So Owen shared Muzak on Hex, and it's a mutation testing library.
Mutation testing. That's
Dinesh, thank you. Yes. Mutation testing. Yes. You're the man.
Awesome. Right. Okay. I really want to try this out because it's a really exciting idea. Yeah.
I have so many new bookmarks from this conversation.
Yeah. My reading list is overflowing, especially because I'm like, honest. I don't think anybody, I tell people all the time I'm busy, and I don't think anybody even really understands. I just don't like, oh my God, my stack is so huge. And I have a job also, which I mean, okay, that's a little bit of
that's
a big
your
part of my job.
You just get to also work on something really cool.
Right. A big part of my job is working on Ash. But we have a thing called Ash Premium Support. Like sometimes I do client work, sometimes up to 50% of my time will be on client work. But we also have a thing called Ash Premium Support that has been going really well. But that can also, that has a lot of interesting aspects to it. It's basically like you get a Slack channel, like a connected Slack channel to myself and other members of the core team and other people at Alembic that work on Ash. It's basically like you can just ask us questions. You can request code review and all this sort of stuff. And it's really nice, but it also is just another it's another thing, right? And those often the benefit of those for the people who are our customers is not just asking me questions. You can share your code, We have, we have an NDA. Like we can get access to your GitHub repo. I can clone your code down and I can do all this, I can test it myself and help you find your bugs and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, you put it all together and it's just like, my life is crazy.
It's good. You got to stay busy.
Yeah, maybe a little bit less busy, but we'll get there.
Hey,
the book, I think yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, at least we got you on a podcast.
Well, yeah, I luckily I can write this into my work schedule. Right?
Oh, nice. Perfect.
This is part of it.
Carl asked a question. He said, according to some posts on Elixir forum, the new hologram model might pair very well with Ash framework so much that it coined a new stack term. Why is that?
Okay. Well, the new hologram model is very declarative. Again, look, the truth is I made it like I made a new app with hologram and with Ash, and I confirmed that there's no reason why you couldn't call Ash actions from the hologram commands and stuff like that. But it's a very declarative way to build web apps, which is very interesting. There's web frameworks is a very deep stack. So just because you can build an HTML page that can call an action doesn't necessarily mean, I don't know yet. I really have to look into it. But I think actually there's a layer that can be built into or on top of it that is almost like, we think of it as like an Ash native data source for pages. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time. And when I saw hologram in early development, I was like, ooh, maybe that's where this can slot into. But is this declarative method of defining data sources that you just say, like, for instance, let's say you had a users list, right? You could define like a data pipeline source that says it's like users, and that and the way hologram compiles everything about your application, it knows it could figure out what it needs, like what fields have to be loaded, what related things have to be loaded, all this sort of stuff, and manage data fetching for you automatically. And then when you render a component, you could say, modify your data pipeline like so. So if you wanted to make a top 10 users thing, you would say, only the top 10 users, and that would like scope this. I know this is really like heady stuff and it's probably does not make a lot of sense, but you could parameterize the data source for any given component to something that you already have defined in your data pipeline, or modify how it works in its data pipeline. And so you could build these applications that are fully declarative, top down, fully declarative, with their data sources as modeled as a data pipeline. And I think hologram would be a really good place for something like that to be explored, but it's complicated and it's going to take a lot of time, and I probably won't be the one to do it anytime soon. I will happily provide architecture guidance on somebody who wants to explore that concept, though.
Carl, it's on you for asking the question.
Yeah, thanks for signing up.
I am curious to check out hologram though a little bit. It could be interesting.
The getting started was like, it's pretty seamless to get things going, and like in a lot of ways it feels like live view, but even less JavaScript. Like, okay, because you just write Elixir and it compiles it to JavaScript, and you get this like really nice. It's pretty cool. I think the uphill battle that hologram, right? It's got an uphill battle though. Any web framework that goes that far from the norm, it's even further from the norm than live view is, right? It's going to be an uphill battle where it doesn't really matter how good it is. You really have to prove it. You have to prove it at scale. You have to prove all these edge cases and all of the things,
Yeah.
And I'm rooting for it. I hope it comes out on top. But before people are going to put their money where their mouth is on that front, it's a chicken and the egg problem a bit, but it's an exciting idea.
Yeah, it seems cool. Do you know what version they're on? I got to see if I can try to find
0.2, I think. Like they just released their first.
Gotcha.
And like their website and everything. I think if you go to hologram.page, let me see if that's the actual website. Yeah, hologram.page is the home page for for it. And hey folks, toss them a GitHub star.
Yeah, I already did. I can add all these testing frameworks and this into the description afterwards as well, because I feel like people always like when I reference them when we talk about them.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about, I feel like I should transcribe my podcasts so they can be like queried or searched on my podcast page on my website. I think that would be cool. So if you're searching for a topic, you can find the episode with it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, are they on YouTube? Because YouTube does do like the auto transcriptions,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I know
they
they're on
are
YouTube.
on. Oh yeah, I wonder, can you download the transcriptions from YouTube?
I'm,
That would be
I'm pretty
cool.
sure you can.
I'll have to check that out. That would make my life a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, like even if it's not perfect, it's like it doesn't make it not useful, right?
Right,
Like
exactly.
in techie conversations, is like it's gonna get a bunch of crap wrong, like, but
Yeah,
better than nothing.
right.
You could probably
Yeah.
run it through ChatGPT and be like, what fix the mistakes from the like which of these words like don't make sense or something. I don't know. Like
Yeah, actually, I bet that would work well.
uh,
Yeah, I'll have to try it because like today I told you like someone asked a question in my Discord about doing the assert and you have when you have escape characters. I think I was talking to either Peter or Alex. I don't remember, but like it's something where they referenced a specific way to not worry about that, and it would be really nice just to search my podcast episodes and be like, oh, here it is.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that walled garden stuff is kind of interesting. Like we can have this problem in our Discord too, because it's like our Discord, like people who don't know about our Discord think that Ash is like, well, not quite true. Since we moved to Elixir Forum, there's like tons of people in the Elixir Forum, so like the people realize like Ash is actually used by a lot of people. But there's even more in our Discord. It's like we have like 1,200 people in our Discord, not like 1,200 daily active users, but like there's a lot of people in there.
Oh, I am in it. I'm in the Ash Discord group.
Nice. But yeah, when you go in, it's like you have to search there, right? Like you can't Google search for all of this support that I've done for people.
Yeah,
And that's a
yeah.
problem.
That makes it rough.
Yeah, that was a big reason we encourage people to ask questions on Elixir Forum. It's because then it's like people searching Google. It's like one thing to know where you're searching, but to just search Google is important. And I guess for LLMs, right? If everybody's using LLMs, like the AI's got to know how to use our stuff.
Yep, for sure. Oh, Discord's banned in some countries. I didn't know that.
Right. That's another reason why Discord can't be like the only place that you communicate. I would love if there was something that to a reasonable degree of fidelity had like things that are, Discord level features and community management and like ease of use and all this sort of stuff with a forum and all that, and not in a proprietary place, but like, where you could be searched by Google. There are things like it. I think there's like, I don't know, it's called like Zulip or there's some things like that
that would be really cool.
Are out there.
Well, like
not,
X is super Googleable, so like
right.
If I search my name, I feel like X posts show up first. It would be cool to have like a Discord version of that where the conversations are somehow, maybe your channel is more of I don't know. I feel like it'd be a little difficult to do, but.
So I actually wrote, I don't know if it still is. I think it might show up if you go to it explicitly, but if you go to like ashhq.org/forum, no, okay. It doesn't show up anymore. But I was synchronizing using a Discord bot, forum, like, Discord forum channels, that are like support or like,
oh, that's
like
smart.
Forums.
Yeah.
I was synchronizing it to a website that had a link to the Discord conversation, but then it was also searchable on Google.
That's smart. Yeah. Like I do that with
not that hard.
I always make Discord events for like the podcast and stuff. And then I put the event on my website, but I like that. Like a forum post, I could just easily do that.
Yeah. But the only basic problem is like doing SEO well is like not great. You know what I mean? Like being on Elixir Forum has the best SEO in the Elixir ecosystem right now.
For sure.
By like a long shot.
Yeah.
This is honestly the number one reason why I suggested people go there is because it's going to be the most likely thing for other people to be able to find answers to their questions when they're not searching Elixir Forum. They're just searching Google. And so I couldn't replicate that with my thing. Like it just was never going to get the same level of SEO.
I need to be better about posting. Like I should be posting my podcast episodes on there and all of that. And I don't.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah. SEO, man. A game that I hate playing, but you have to.
No. Yeah, it is really frustrating. It's always better to ride somebody else's coattails, like go on Stack Overflow or, post on X or a well-indexed forum or whatever, right? Than to try and like optimize it for your own website. It's just,
When is Igniter going to optimize my SEO and meta tags for me?
Yeah. Well, David Bernhazel has like a SEO, like some sort of ecto-based SEO thing at some point. And we've talked about doing that for Ash, where it like automatically creates all these meta tags for your content or something along those lines.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I forget what the package is called, but it's a really interesting idea. But I want to.
Is it called SEO?
Probably. It sounds like a name for it.
I'm just surprised. Like, there's an SEO on Hex. I'm like, I can't believe they didn't say like SEO X. Everyone has to do the EX on the end of all their libraries.
I mean, well, Jose himself, like early on when people were making packages, was like telling people like, stop doing that. like we know there are Elixir packages. Like you don't have to put X whatever or X or I thought that was kind of funny. Like it's just hard to avoid the puns. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna get libraries like Excalibur and Ex Machina and all this stuff, right? Like. Because of course, it looks like it's just SEO, and I think that this is David Bernhazel's
cool
project.
I'm gonna another bookmark from this conversation.
Yeah, this benefit of being like so embedded in the Elixir ecosystem, and I go to a lot of conferences at this point and have a lot of those conversations. Is I mean, I haven't used most of the things that I told you about.
Yeah.
I get to know about them at least.
Well, it's the same. Like, I have a hard time just keeping up. Like, one, I don't like. I'm on social media, but it's not my favorite thing. Like, I'm not quickly going there to post and read posts. But like, when I have guests on my podcast, they just just share all their knowledge with me.
Yeah, lucky. Well, it's nice of you to share that with the world, though, too, right? So
I can just I can just be out of date with everyone and just ask dumb questions, and I just get informed. It's great.
It's your job, right? Like like you got to ask the questions that other people want to hear answers to, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. I think like what you're doing is so important for the Elixir ecosystem too. Like, and we've seen more of it happening. Like I'm streaming, Brian Cardarella is streaming.
Peter streams a lot.
Peter, I don't know how to say his last name.
Daniel Bergholtz streams a lot.
Right. I think that Elixir is entering that phase. We're coming a little bit out of our like introspective shell. And so I think it's really good. We need more content just in general, just more stuff worth watching and stuff that increases the surface area, the points of contact for people in general.
Well, like my like tutorial videos are very like beginner oriented, and it's funny, like when I look at my analytics, my podcast is like 35 to 45 year olds, because I think it's more like technical banter versus like learning, and then the people learning and watching my tutorials are like 22 to 28. Like it's funny to see the age gap difference for the different content I put out.
I mean, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And we were just talking about it. We got to think about those people who are just getting started. Even, and we got to think about it. Got to step out of our own shoes and like put our own egos aside and say like, even if they're wrong and all of our tools are perfect, they don't feel like it is. Like they still have challenges, right? Like we still have to help them. Even if it's like I've found this a lot. It's like, how do we help them discover them? Like if the resources are there, but they didn't find them, it's like, there are people there like help vampires, like people who'd never put in their own effort. Right. But I don't think most people are that. It's like, okay, maybe you need a more flashy, interesting index, a more flashy, interesting homepage. Like maybe you need different mediums, right? A great example, like you're one of the few people, maybe one of the only people out there putting the little snippets, like the little 30-second, 60-second real length content, right? And like, look, as much as I have enjoyed this conversation, new people to Elixir are not going to listen to a 60-minute, 70-minute podcast and have that mean anything to them. Like, this is for the people that are already a part of this ecosystem.
Right.
And so, I think that stuff, new mediums, having new conversations, speaking at non-Elixir conferences, all of these things we need to be doing as a community.
Yeah.
So we're working on it.
For sure. Yeah. I'm doing my first in person. I'm doing a meetup here in Utah, which
I saw that.
Well, that'll be interesting. We'll see how it goes.
Cool.
It's hard to decide how because my tutorials are very code along, but I feel like if you can't watch them at 2x, you might not enjoy watching them, kind of thing. And you can't do that in person. So finding the balance of how you deliver information is kind of tricky. But I think it'll be fun, and it'll network me with a lot of local Elixir devs. So that'll be cool.
For sure. Yeah. So I've done some trainings now at this point. We have one coming up. I probably should have put this in the beginning just because, but at which conference is the next one? Codebeam US in San Francisco. Nice. We have, we're doing a training there, an ASH training. I'm going to publish a video about that next week, actually, with a previous attendee, which I'm very excited about. But the first time I did a training, it went so badly. I hated it. I hated it so much. I mean, it wasn't people said, no, it was fine. It was okay. But the truth is somebody got up and left in the middle of the training because it was that boring. Right.
Yeah.
And they paid for it. They paid for the training, and they were and to me, that was such a massive learning experience. And at first I was I'm never doing that again. I'm not a trainer. But I work, Josh Price, who runs the agency that I work for, we worked together. We came up with something. And the second training we ran, people really loved it. Glowing reviews. We flipped everything on its head. We focused so much more on interactivity and all these other things that matter. And now actually our training is kind of a well-oiled machine. I enjoy giving it. It's actually it's fun for me.
Yeah.
It's teaching is a totally different ball game. It's a totally different set of skills, new muscles. So anybody who can do it effectively, especially I am lucky. I usually not super beginners that are learning my content. Right. But so especially for beginners, it's hats off.
Beginner stuff, beginner stuff, you have to go back. You have to remember what it was like when you were learning, right? And you can't overteach things. You can't be you can't go too deep. You have to stay very surface level, but still accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Right. Which is so hard. It's really difficult to remember or to think about from that perspective, what you didn't know when you, and what people don't know and what you take for granted, all those things. It's one of the most interesting. It's one of the most, when you're talking with somebody who really knows what they're talking about, it makes it so fascinating to hear the things that they just brush by and the things that they focus on.
Yeah.
Because that actually is educational in its own way, but it also makes it really difficult to follow those people sometimes because it's the first time I was talking to, when I first ever developer job, I was actually doing DevOps. And I remember I had one of our resident neckbeards who was the nicest guy, really helped me with all this sort of stuff. Right. But I was how do you do this? And he was well, you open your terminal, and he's and you're going to have to write a bash script to do this. And here's what you want to do. And I'm we're 5 minutes into his explanation. And I'm I'm sorry, I have to stop you. But what is a bash script? And he's oh, right. I didn't even think to ask if you knew what that was. And so, I think it's that sort of stuff. It's so hard to put yourself in.
It's very I remember when I first started learning how to program, a lot of the times you start understanding the programming parts, right? But it's the developer tools you struggle with. Git is an easy one to learn, but it can be scary when you're first touching it. But then just installing tools like NPM or package managers, whatever you're doing, people forget that takes a lot of resources. And it's you're kind of just installing things blind and you don't know what you're doing, but you have to,
remember
to do it. Yeah.
Right. When you didn't know what an environment variable even was, let alone
Yeah.
why everything was failing because an environment variable wasn't set. Like, what does that even sound like to
Yeah.
a new person? What the hell is an environment variable? Like, like,
Yeah. Or like
um,
just reading errors and logs and not understanding what they
right.
mean. Like that would be, I've always wanted to make content around like debugging and breaking things at like a very like basic level, but it's really hard to plan that kind of content because I don't know. One of these days I'll probably do it because I think it'd be super beneficial. Like,
Yeah.
how do you read like if you're just like local hosting a Phoenix app, how do you read like some of the basic errors, you know?
Yeah. There's so much context that goes into like there's a lot of time you're working with like a beginner and you see an error and you're like, oh, that's got to be like over here. And they're like, how did you know that? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I couldn't like possibly tell you what all the things that came together were.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody experiences that as they get, it's not something special about me. It's something about learning a field deeply that um, it's so difficult to like, it's all of the amalgamation of long experience that actually gets you to a point where you can, find and address these like complex issues. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think a guy like some kind of thing that gives users more ammunition and methodologies, like how to think about those things and how to find them, and would be
Debugging
really valuable.
is a skill in itself too. Like you can't really learn it without lots of repetition, right? And just
Right.
banging your head against the wall.
Yeah. You got to make stuff with bugs before you can realistically debug it,
Yeah.
which fun fact is really easy. Actually, I do it all the time. So,
It's super easy. In fact,
yeah.
every time I write code and then write tests for it, I have to go refactor because my logic was off.
Yep. Yep. There it is. That's the one thing. What is like all code is bad code. You know what I mean? Like anybody who tells you that they write really good code, I just
If
don't believe them.
if you're not embarrassed when you go back to it in 6 months, you haven't grown as a developer, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is very true.
When is the Beam conference in San Francisco?
It's in March, I think. I should know. I'm actually going to like 5 different conferences this year that are scheduled.
Dang.
So they're all kind of March 6th and 7th
Okay.
is the conference. But we're also doing a training in Alchemy Conf for my European friends. That's in Braga, Portugal.
Nice.
I will likely be doing Elixir Conf EU and US. The other conference I'm really excited about. It's really cool. Lars Wickman has Goatmeyer in Sweden,
Oh,
and
nice.
he has pulled an amazing cast of speakers to go to, and sorry, but this random place in Sweden, like it's like 5 hours from Copenhagen and
Oh,
from Stockholm.
wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So like,
yeah.
and in this place called Varberg, which I'm really excited to go to, but like I don't know, like he must have the most magnetic personality because he's got all of these people coming from all over the world to speak at Goatmeyer, and I'm unreasonably excited about it. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. There's no project updates
That's
for these
awesome.
talks. They're all going to be like, I don't know. It's just going to be like an edgy conference in a way. Like
I like it.
uh,
Nice. That's
yeah.
cool. I have to get like the last conference I booked was Lisbon, and then I got
Hmm.
super sick the day before. I had to cancel everything. Like I canceled my flight, everything. And I just haven't gotten back on the bandwagon, but I think it'd be fun to start showing up at some conferences.
I mean, I love it. For me, it's all about the hallway track. A lot of that is because a lot of the talks that are coming out are like, I'm so like into this crap that I've already like
Yeah.
seen those libraries or I've talked to those people, but the hallway track is just, you cannot replace it. And that's why like when, I think digital or virtual conferences personally, I'm sorry, but I don't care about them because
Yeah.
for me, it's like, it's not the talks that are relevant
Yeah. It's the
to me
network and the
really.
side conversations that you have with people, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the talks like spark that. They help you find interesting people. And so maybe you go to these
Mhm.
interesting talks, right? But the reason that you pay for the ticket, because you'll get that, it'll be on YouTube for most conferences, you know what I mean?
Right.
But the reason you pay for the ticket is because when you see something really interesting, you want to know, I can probably go talk to that guy. I can go ask him my own questions, and or even grab a beer with him or a meal with him after or I can go talk to I mean, there's so many great people that I've met at conferences that I don't know.
People aren't real until you meet them in person. It's just
right.
You're fake. You're just over the internet right now.
I know. I'm just pixels.
Yeah, I don't even think, the Ash framework guy is real.
You actually won't be the first person. I actually get this comment regularly. People think that I'm like an AI agent of some kind because I respond to questions like,
dude, you are very responsive. I will say, guys, if you start using Ash on the forum, and if the question already hasn't been answered, Zach is right there for you.
Yeah, we're going to see how sustainable this is. The user base is growing, and the demands on my time are growing.
The good news is every time you answer something, it's cataloged and it can just be referenced after that too.
Right, and other people are picking up the slack too, right? A lot of times now, what I'm doing, I still am answering most questions. But there are a lot of times now where I just go check and I'm like, yeah, somebody answered this question already. So
nice.
They're good to go. That's nice for me.
That's awesome. That's the benefit of a growing community, right?
Yeah. It is interesting though. You have this kind of similar, I almost want to do a talk someday of lies I told myself or fantasies I believed would be true when my open source project got traction, which is all, the thing is every user in general is a net cost to me personally. On average, users don't help more than they require. And we've got, thousands and thousands of users at this point. And I think that's the thing is I didn't realize how strategic I was going to have to be and how it's a choice. It's a choice you don't have to make. The amount of support that I provide to people, I could just keep my hands off the wheel and just see what happens. And I don't owe this to anybody. I personally feel responsibility, but
I'll tell you firsthand, it's hard to stay on top of questions. Even in my Discord, I rarely have time to go and answer them. And luckily I have some awesome dudes in there that just will answer for me, but it's hard, especially when you're busy doing other stuff.
Right.
Support is hard. Yeah,
totally. And I think the only reason I do a decent job at it is that I have ADHD or something, not diagnosed. I'm just saying I have this actually kind of bothers me when people just, I have undiagnosed thing. But the point is,
I feel the new thing these days is to just admit you have you're on the spectrum, you're autistic in some way.
Right. I mean, yeah, look, for me, I will hop context all the time. And I think that's just because I'll seek a distraction. And instead of finding social media or something, my distraction, my little mini entertainment while I'm doing my big tasks or whatever is answering people's questions.
Yeah.
But if I didn't have that context switching ability, it would be next to impossible.
Yeah, it can be hard. I mean, that's healthier sounding than going on social media,
True.
'Cause at least you're helping someone.
Yeah. Every once in a while, though, it just turns into a massive amount of work for me. When it's a bug, and then it's well, shit, this is 4 days it's going to take me to fix this, and it's an important bug, and I have to fix this. And so sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I had just gone on YouTube, not have seen this, could have pretended like it didn't exist for a couple days, but I do not have that luxury.
You know what? It kind of drives me nuts, but I also get it. But a lot of my YouTube content is older, right? So one, you learn a lot, and as you teach and write more tutorials, you get better at it. But when people are well, why didn't you do it this way? I was well, it's easy to look at a problem that you solved a different way after it's already been solved.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I could have done it that way. I also could have done it this way, about a million different ways. But you always have that one guy that's I'm going to try to be smarter than me. And I'm you probably are. You're probably smarter than me. That's okay.
Yeah. Well, it's there's always a, why didn't you do it this way? Even that better, better option that somebody proposed. It's like, I did it the way I thought of doing it that sufficed with my requirements, and
Yeah.
job
And,
done. Right.
and then if there's a reason to refactor, I will.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's, done software is really good. And it's like, yeah. I mean, we always talk about this, right? That's why you go back to a file and you're like, what is this crap? You know what I mean?
Or like,
even if it's somebody else's code.
Who wrote this crap? And it's your commit.
It's your own.
Yeah.
All the time. There's always a better way to do it, but done is the most important metric. Right?
Well, what's interesting, like with the team that I just joined, I've always been startup mode, right? Like only a couple thousand users on a system. And now I have to shift my perspective to performance, and like every database hit matters. And like it really changes the way you write code when you have to think about performance or how it will scale or be distributed and all of that. And I'm like, it's exciting because every day I'm learning new stuff now in just a different manner.
That's actually kind of an interesting thing about a lot of the choices we made in Ash. Like in general, like if you do like a repo.insert, it's going to be at least a little faster than like ash.create, because like we're like doing more stuff. Like an action is not just a database operation, right? And we have more things to check and more valid, more like et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of the thing that's the thing is like once you get into that environment, like the one you're describing, certain things that were simple like are no longer simple. You can't just do the simple thing anymore, right? And Rebecca, also who I've mentioned already, but works on the book. You might probably seen her around in the community helping if you are using Ash. She's probably answered a question of yours. But
I should bring her on. I'll have to wait. I'll wait for the book launch and then bring her on.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. She's a great speaker, but she doesn't think she is. So, I would love for her to come on.
I shouldn't assume I'll bring her on. I'll try to get her on. We'll see.
Exactly. I think she would do a wonderful job. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah. The way she phrases it is really interesting, which is that Ash kind of levels out the difficulty curve, which is some of the really simple things get a little bit harder because you have to learn this new way of doing it. And you have to but it's designed in such a way that when you have to do some of these really hard things, those are a lot easier.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, look, whether or not you want to pay that cost or even agree with the statement that I'm putting out is totally fine. Yeah. Right. But I think that's also a similar thing when it comes to building things that actually scale. And a lot of the reason why we make the choices that we make is for that later thing when the simple answer never works. Like you have to build things in a certain way that, that you actually have certain choices and certain capabilities. And that scale applies to both like load, like from an application standpoint, but also scale to the size of code base, scale to the size of teams, right? All these things, all of a sudden the easy answer that you were using when you started using your, Phoenix New, and you're like, look how easy it is to do this. It's like, well, hold up. You can't just, there's like 20 people working on this. You can't just go change the user create function, like slow down, or this thing is called 400,000 times a minute. You can't just go add a log line to it. Right. Like there's all of a sudden those simple things go out the door. So it is interesting, and you can't practice on your own those concepts because you have to have a real app, like a real app that somebody paid money to exist.
I feel like it's a very rare circumstance once you start hitting like 2 million users and like, when you have a lot of active daily users, a lot of apps never get there and you don't run into those problems.
Right. Yeah. Which is why all those there's so many frameworks out there that have these really wonderful getting started guides. And
then they don't scale. Well, they do. You just have to throw a lot of money at it. And
yeah, you can, if you're willing to pay Vercel $10,000 a month or something. They scale fine.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, it's you're like, I think that's just a good point too. Like you're never done learning. There's always a new problem that's going to arise.
If you're doing it right, absolutely. Look, I always tell people this who are starting out with software engineering too, that like your job as a software engineer is to be a professionally confused person. You are always at the limits of your knowledge. Otherwise, you're not growing. And so your job is never, I mean, sometimes like, as an agency, part of our job is to show up and know exactly how to do what people want to do. But when we are pushing our own limits, when I'm building my own tools, right? When we're working on an application, right? We always have those encounters with things we don't understand. Your job isn't to know how to do all those things. It's not like, there are professions where you can know how to do something and you do it the same way every time.
Right.
And our industry does not work that way. You will always be confused, and you should live in it. Get used to it. Love it. Love the feeling of I have no idea how I'm going to actually
get used to not knowing how to do anything. Always.
Absolutely.
Right. And you just slowly you slowly learn how to do things, but then the things that you know already suddenly don't matter because there's new things you don't know how to do.
Right.
So,
but then, you get that when you get that experience, you go back to it and you realize like, holy shit, this would have been really hard for me a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah.
And now it's like the back, right off the noggin. Right. I'm like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. That's easy. Right.
Yeah.
So you got to remind yourself that you are growing, but learn to love that.
Learn to love to not know what you're doing.
Yep,
but yeah, it is cool. Like when I think about where I was 10 years ago, I struggled passing data from one view to another in an iOS app.
Right.
And that would be a second nature thing. And I haven't even touched Xcode in years, man. So, and I could still probably go back and write a pretty decent iOS app.
I do not know anything about iOS apps, and I think that's another crazy example too, is it's like, you can have 3 people have been doing software engineering for 40 years and their knowledge will overlap very little even.
Right. Yeah. Well, the team I just joined, I work with a lot of really smart dudes and they know a lot of shit. It's cool.
Yeah. I love it. You never want to be the smartest person in the room.
No.
I mean, I can't help it. Most rooms I'm in. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, you really, if you're at a
daycare right now, right?
That's the only way it would work. Yeah. Yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense. You want to be around people that challenge you and not even just knowledge wise, right? Rebecca and I, when we first started working together, Rebecca is the reason. There's a lot of things that are good about Ash Framework that were not good before Rebecca got her hands on it and gave me no end of shit about why it is the way that it is. And, this doesn't make sense. This is, and at the time, I took it personally, and we got along, it was totally fine. But I remember I had to learn, especially because it's this is my baby. This is the thing that I'm making. Right. And it's one thing to say that you take feedback well. And it's another thing to take it well. And it's another thing to take it well internally. Right. Mm-hmm. Just because other people don't see the turmoil that happens inside your brain when you take feedback, just because you're saying, oh, okay, that makes sense. They might not realize that your blood just started pumping and your heart rate just went up, and inside you're thinking, oh my God, I hate, oh man, whatever. But
why do I even program?
Right. Exactly. But the way that she challenged a lot of those things was really good for me in the long run.
Yeah. That's good. You need that.
Yeah. Yeah. You need people who challenge you on your knowledge, but also on the way that you work, mm-hmm. and on what you take personally, or your ego, and your, all these different types of things, like how well do you write testing? Because there's going to be people out there who are, when they see you make a PR with not enough tests, they're going to be like, no way, this is no way I'm going to allow this. And in your mind, you thought, well, I thought it was tested just fine. And now you have to incorporate that into your, mm-hmm. your ego, right? That you thought this was good enough. And this person's saying it's unacceptable. And you have to understand, they're not calling you stupid. I mean, maybe they are, but probably aren't, and getting all that. Yeah. You always want to be with people challenging you in any number of ways.
Yeah, I agree. No, I'm excited. I'm excited for the Ash Framework book. That'll be cool. Igniter is awesome. Get your hands on it. If you're writing a library, you better include Igniter, all the cool kids are,
Yeah. And it's a lot easier than you think it is. That's the thing. And if you have challenges, hit me up, but it's really not so hard to write at least a basic Igniter installer.
Yeah.
And I think that eventually I'll give people a teaser about the long-term thing that, here, because I imagine we're reaching the end of our stream.
Yeah, we can wrap it up soon.
The where I think kind of an end goal of Igniter or one of its like final forms is both a catalog and a wizard for building new Elixir applications that knows like that presents you with all these options, almost like an interactive awesome Elixir list. Like you might go to awesome Elixir on GitHub and see like a markdown file of all these awesome projects. But imagine if you could just check a bunch of boxes next to the ones that you want and then just make a new project with all that stuff installed. Like more than just in the dependencies, but like installed and ready to work, right? And I think that that's going to be a really big deal, both for adoption, but also for like experimentation, because you have this installer wizard, but you can also just install things after generating an application. That's so important. So when you're over here, you're like, oh, I didn't, I want to use Phoenix Live View, and I really want to get Igniter to back Phoenix someday. It's a very popularly used framework, so I understand like if it happens, it's gonna be a long road and it's gonna have to be really well vetted and all that sort of stuff. But imagine if you could just opt out of all of that crap when you first start, not crap, but opt out of all of this extra stuff when you first start your app, and then just say, oh, you know what? Actually, I do want to use Live View. Mix Igniter.install Phoenix Live View.
Yeah.
And get all of everything set up.
That's one of the hard things too. When you start a project, like a good example for me, when I first I created my first REST API project, right? All I wanted it to be was a REST API because I wasn't a front end guy, blah, blah, blah. And then I wanted to integrate Live View into it. And it was a lot more difficult of a process, but I wanted Live View for my admin dash and like for a lot of reasons that like people don't necessarily always think about when they start a project. But like, yeah, Igniter would be a perfect use case for that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason that it is the way it is they're trying to, as best they can, reduce the amount of decisions you have to make up front. And so they just make everything in by default. But I think that kind of discounts all of the people who are like, hold up. What don't I want? Because this is a lot of files or this is a lot of stuff, whatever, when you know how it all works, it doesn't seem like that much to you. But to a lot of new people, they're like, whoa, what is all this stuff? So now they're sitting there thinking, well, what don't I want? And if we could tell them, don't worry about it. You can add anything you want later. Just like, that's the big thing you cannot do with Mix Phoenix New. You cannot just say, oh, actually, I changed my mind. And if we can give people that, then that really does reduce the decision fatigue right out of the gate. Just make a basic project and it's okay. Like you'll be able to add anything you want later. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And I really want that for exploratory purposes, for people who are trying out Elixir and Phoenix for the first time. Like most people trying out Elixir for the first time are doing it because they're using Phoenix or they're using Ash. We have a lot of new people to Elixir through Ash. We have to ease their way as much as possible, even to the point of like ridiculous extremes to make it pleasant and to make that on-ramp good.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. All right, Zach. Thank you so much for joining me. Feel free to reach out and come on anytime you want. If we can't get Rebecca to come on as a guest, or you could both come on when the book comes out. That could be a lot of fun. And that takes the pressure off her a little bit if she doesn't like to speak.
I mean, I think also part of it, I like take up a lot of the air in the room. I forget not to talk sometimes. But yeah,
you're my favorite kind of podcast guest. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, somebody who could just talk until their mouth falls off.
I just sit here and nod,
Oh man.
All right, cool. Well, guys, thank you for everyone that tuned in. I feel like chat was very active during this, and I love when like it's more interactive. It makes it a lot more fun. So everyone, have a good weekend, and we'll see you in the next one. I feel like my scheduling's kind of wonky lately. It's not every Friday, but I'll try to get it back under control. But have a good weekend, everyone. Testing.